Hello and welcome to haQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a haQ episode. Now in this episode, I'm basically choosing my top 10 FX plugin apps from 118 that were released back in 2020. And before we get into the list, I want to shout out Tony and I want to shout out his YouTube channel, and I want to tell you quickly why I'm doing it and who he is and what he does. If you're not interested, go to this timestamp and the list starts there. Everyone else keep watching. Now, I'm a sober alcoholic and drug addict, and I've been that since I started haQ. And you are part of the reason to why I'm able to, how I'm able to keep myself afloat, keep myself, driven to make content for this channel, because I feel like what I have to give is needed by someone, at least. I want to thank you for making me feel needed. Thank you for building this channel with me, and thank you for keeping me sober. So Tony started a group on Facebook called Sobriety and Synthesizers, where people like myself, sober people, or people wanting to get sober, wanting to stay sober, or trying to figure out if they should get sober, can go and talk about this topic together with, in the world of music gear and making music and stuff like that. It's a lovely group, a lot of love in there. Now Tony has added something to this, and it is a YouTube channel where he interviews people like myself, and I've been a guest on his show. I think I was the first one, and we're talking about like no BS, straight up talk, honest talk about this topic. It might not be for everybody, but if you're interested in that, if you want to talk about this, you have a link to the group down in the description, in a pinned comment, and also the link to the YouTube channel where you can check out the interviews. So yeah, thank you Tony for all your hard work. You're amazing, dude. Just keep doing what you're doing. Now it's time for the top list. Roll intro. Now, the first app on our list is Rough Rider 3 by Audio Damage, and they made this one and replaced the older Rough Rider 2. Now, this app was released back in January 2020, and I saw some people who were a little bit upset over the fact that, the old one was gone. But here's the thing, if you want the sound of the old one, you only have to go into Rough Rider 3 and turn off the full bandwidth, and you essentially have the Rough Rider 2 plugin inside Rough Rider 3. Now this app supports a standalone mode, inter-app audio, AUv3 multi-IO, and it uses that multi-IO for the external sidechain input. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I'm using Rough Rider 3 on a daily basis, because I like how it slightly colors the sound. It's pretty low on hardware resources, so you can use quite a lot of them before you hit any walls. Well, it all depends on the iPad or iPhone model you're using. And yes, you heard right, because it is available for both iPad and iPhone. And another thing that is really good with it is that it's completely free. You pay nothing for this app. The only complaint I have is that it only has a high-pass filter for the sidechain, and I'd rather have a low-pass filter. But that's the only complaint I can think of. Go get Rough Rider 3. The next app on our list is one that got a lot of attention when it came out, after it came out, and back in August this year, I did a video where I tested all of the shimmer reverbs available on iOS, 7 of them. And it turns out that a lot of people seem to love FAC Altessa by Frederick Corvest. So it came out in February 2020. It supports a standalone mode and it also supports AUv3. Now it also has AUv3 multi-IO and it uses that for an external sidechain input, and you can use that sidechain input to duck the reverb tail of Altessa. Now this thing is available for both iPad and iPhone, and why should you get it? Well, it sounds absolutely massive, and it is the smoothest shimmer reverb I've ever heard on iOS. And you don't have to take my word for it. Like I said, go watch that 7 shimmer reverb list video that I did, and it becomes very clear, very apparent how different all of these shimmer reverbs sound from one another. And I would say that Altessa has one of the best sounds, at least to my ears. It's absolutely wonderful how good it sounds. Now there's one more thing to this. FAC Altessa uses these stages or banks of all-pass delays or all-pass filters, and it has 3 stages of them. Well, back in December 2020, Fred updated Altessa so that you can now route out the 3rd stage of these all-pass delays or filters as its own output when you're using the AUv3 multi-IO routing. Either way, I highly recommend Altessa. And now we're gonna jump over to the next app on our list. Back in June 2020, Brambos released WOOT, and this is the first time that we on iOS have access to an OTT compressor, which Woot is, and that's why it's got OTT in its name. Now, OTT stands for over-the-top compression, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But first, this is an audio unit extension, and it also has support for AUv3 multi-IO. Now, this can be used for the external sidechain, but then you also have 3 extra outputs. And before I get into that, let me just explain real quickly what an OTT compressor is. Basically, it is a multi-band compressor and expander in one. So what it does is, it does compression like any other compressor that we normally come in contact with. And if we're gonna use proper terms, then it's called downward compression. But on top of that, it also does upwards compression at the same time. So not only does it squash things down, it also pushes things up. Now, when it comes to the electronic dance music production scene, it's something that they use a lot. And I can't say that all of them uses it, producers, but it is being used a lot simply because it has an ability to really introduce edginess and enhance edginess in synth leads, synth bass, even vocoder vocals. Now, to jump back to the AUv3 multi-out, each of the bands in here can be outputted on their own individual channel through that system, which is also interesting. I highly recommend Woot, and that's all I'm going to say about it. So let's move on to the next plugin on our list. And so the next one is Stratosphere Cloud Reverb. Now, this one was made by Money Consulting Limited Company, also called Blue Mango. That looks like a mango. It's a blue mango. Blue mango. I get it. It was released back in June 2020. It is an audio unit extension, and it is a reverb. A huge, massive reverb with a very specific sound to it. took me about a month before I could actually check it out, but as soon as I did, it only took me a few hours before I started working on a video for it. And I did a review for this app back in July, and you should really go check that out because I really go into what it is that makes this one so good. But if you don't want to go watch that video, well, it basically has the ability to do ridiculously long reverb tails. You see, it has a decay time of up to 50 seconds, almost a minute of decay time. And it does this without ever becoming metallic like many other reverbs can. The developer has gone out of their way to make something extremely specific. I know I've used that term before, but the way that they filtered the signal flow in this thing, the way that the diffusion sounds when you tweak it, the modulation options, it's so nice. And then there is the on-set time knob. I'd recommend this reverb to anyone doing any sort of music on iOS. I'm sure that you'll find a use for it as soon as you have it in your toolbox. Now, if you're still not convinced, I'll make sure to link to my review of it in the upper right corner here in the card popping out, and also down in the description, and we'll move on to the next plugin on our list. Saturn II by FabFilter. I think this is one of the most versatile saturation/distortion type plugins you could ever get. Why? Well, because it's modular and it gives you a nice set of tools to build your own type of distortion algorithms. Okay, so where do I begin? Well, we have from 1 up to 6 bands of distortion/saturations that we can set up. And each of the bands have tone controls, and it actually offers everything from 6 up to 48 decibel per octave options for the band crossovers. Now, you can go even further here and bring in some modulation through LFOs, XY controllers, sliders, envelope generators, envelope followers, and you can even use MIDI to trigger stuff. And when we're talking about triggering stuff, well, since this thing has support for AUv3 multi-IO, if you're using Saturn II inside 8 Matrix or AUM, which has support for this multi-IO system for AUv3, well, you can also use an external sidechain to trigger LFOs. And the LFOs, by the way, have slope controls. Okay, so apparently I was so excited when I recorded this, I didn't even notice that I said LFOs instead of envelopes. What I meant to say is that you can trigger the envelopes with external sidechain, and the envelopes have adjustable slopes. Yes, this plugin is amazing, which is why I'm using it so much for all of my productions now. However, it's only available on iPad and not on iPhone. And in fact, none of the FabFilter plugins are available on iPhone. I don't know if they'll ever be that in the future, but here's to hoping. Either way, I highly recommend Saturn II to any producer out there who needs a really good, versatile saturation/distortion plugin.
Number 6.
Now we're gonna stay on the modular path here, jumping from one modular thing to another one, because the next one is a true modular system for building your own effects. And I'm talking about Neurac AUv3 FX processor by 4Pockets. Now the developer, Paul the musician, well, he's been extremely busy. It's just insane what you can do with this thing. It's so much fun. You need to get this thing. You really do. The thing I did was I built my own visualizer because Neurac has, on top of all the effects modules and everything that it can do, it also has an oscilloscope and it has a spectrum analyzer, level meter, and I put those together. And on top of that, you can also load your own textures through images, which I did. And here it is, my attaQ visualizer plugin. And I've been using that to keep in track of my waveforms whenever I'm working on presets for Agonizer synth. want to end on a note of appreciation for Paul, who makes the For Pocket apps, because I did this live stream where I was using Newrack to try to build my own shimmer reverb, and I couldn't do that properly because in order to build a shimmer reverb, you need some kind of a feedback module to drive the signal back from the pitch and reverb back into itself again, or pitch and delay back into itself again, to get that proper shimmer reverb effect. Well, there weren't any such modules, and he just said, okay, I'll get to work on it. He did, and then a few days later a new update came, and there it was, a feedback module. So thank you, Paul, for listening to us. Now, the next effect is a Velvet Machine by Yuri Turov, and this one is a bit strange, and that's partly why I like it. Well, not partly, it's actually why I like it, because you can get it to act as a tap delay, and you can get it to act as a reverb kind of unit. Something called convolution noise or velvet noise, and if you want to understand what that is, well, there is a section in the manual titled How It Works, and it kind of reads like a science paper. So I read through this science paper and I found this little explanation here. You can think of Velvet Machine as a special kind of multi-tap delay with a huge number of randomly located and densely spaced taps, where the volume of each tap is determined by the envelope. I know, I didn't do a good job explaining exactly what makes this thing tick. It's just that I can't turn this segment into a tutorial. It's a top list, and we'll have to leave it at that. Either way, it really does have its own unique and distinctive sound to it, and that's what I like, whenever developers go out of the way to make something specific. And the second thing I like is the way that you can draw in your own envelopes for this thing, and you can really get creative with that. Yeah, I hope we get to see more plugins like this in 2021. Now, on to the next plugin on our list. Next up is Yukawa AUv3 plugin effect, and it doesn't really tell you in the name what it is, but it is a delay effect, but it's more than just a delay effect. In fact, it has a routing matrix. It's a 16 tap delay where you can actually turn taps on or off, so you can get rhythmic phrases out of this one. Yeah, it's a tap delay with a sequencer, and the cool thing is that the sequencer has more options for you, like pan, cutoff, resonance, and also timing, making it interesting for shuffled delays or, awkward offbeat tempo delay kind of patterns. On top of that, you can also play around with tiny delay effects, and you can create your own flanger or phaser or Haas effect. Now, on top of that, you also have a noise generator, a saturator, and the filter can be driven up to some nasty levels with the drive knob. But wait, there's more, because as I said earlier, there's a routing matrix. Yeah, you can reroute how the signal flows through all of these modules inside here, making it for a very interesting effect. And just turning one of these knobs can drastically change the output of Yukawa. And that's all I'm gonna say about Yukawa. Now, let's move on to the next plugin on our list. Next app on our list is the result of a collaboration between Bram Bose and YouTuber Heinbach, and I am of course referring to Gauss Field Looper. Alright, so what is this thing? Well, it was designed as a field recorder and looper. It's apparent that Bram and Heinbach wanted this thing to sound and behave like a real hardware tape looper. There's even a mode in here called 1989, which if you turn it on, then it changes the bitrate and sample rate down to 8-bit 11 kilohertz, basically oldifying your sound, which is so neat. But then there are some new modern features like the 4-step sequencer in here, and what you use it for is basically rhythmically changing the tape speed. I must say that one thing I like in here is the way that the warble works and also the inertia. It sounds really good, but the warble especially, because usually with tape effects you get a warble that sounds like this one LFO working on the pitch. And yeah, that's usually what it is, but in Gauss it sounds like there's more happening, which gives it more of a warbling feeling, like a real tape machine. Now, there's another thing I like in here, and it's when you're overdubbing, because you can overdub whether you're working with a backwards flowing tape or a forwards flowing tape, which gives you a way of doing some extremely interesting effects. You know, I'm a real sucker for anything that oldifies sound, and the way that Gauss works and the way that it sounds, it really does that kind of thing really well. But even if you aren't into tape stuff, well, it's a great looper that you can just throw into any AUv3 enabled host. So I definitely recommend this one. Go grab it. Alright, so we've got one more app to talk about, and so the last one is Mixbox CS by iK Multimedia. Now this is a 500 series styled mixing console rack thingy. Rack thingy? Yeah, that sounds really legit, Jakob. Looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, hey, this kind of looks like a Euro rack. I mean, it is a rack, but it is a 500 series rack. And I know that this might not be very important because we're talking about an app and I'm about to talk about hardware, but I'm a nerd, so I'm going to keep going for a little while. Stick with me. So if you owned a Eurorack and you went out and you bought a 500 series compressor, for instance, you would quickly realize when trying to put it in that it doesn't quite fit. The rack mounting holes are differently spaced, so you wouldn't be able to screw a 500 series module into a Eurorack. Also, 500 series modules are usually very much deeper than Eurorack modules. And not only that, internally, a 500 series module, well, they're different electronically, so you wouldn't be able to power it from a Eurorack. Now, the intended uses for these different modular systems are also, well, different. Eurorack was made for synthesis and 500 series for processing audio, so I think that might be enough nerdery for me. Sorry, let's get back to Mixbox CS. Well, with that little bit of background history, now it's easier to see what Mixbox is supposed to be, because they've basically emulated a 500 series rack thingy, and you have over 70 modules to choose from. So you can have up to 8 modules in a rack. Now, this works a little bit differently depending on how you're running Mixbox. And so if you're running it as a standalone unit, you can run up to 8 racks. And if you've got a multi-channel sound interface connected to your iPad, then Mixbox will detect all the inputs and outputs, and you can set them up inside here. Now, on the other hand, if you're loading Mixbox as an AUv3 plugin inside an AUv3 host, well, the inputs and outputs have already been taken care of, and you only get 1 rack per plugin window. So basically 1 rack for 8 modules. Well, in the end, for those of you who want to up their mixing game, Mixbox CS gives you a lot of power with a lot of modules that you can just blend any way you want in these racks here. Personally, I like what's in the dynamic section and in the filter section. Now, if you want to go get Mixbox for yourself, then you can find an app link down in the description together with app links for all of the other apps I've talked about. And before you leave, make sure you check out my second channel, Jakob haQ Live, here on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Jakob haQ Live, where I do streaming every Wednesday. And in the last stream, I introduced Discord live chatting, so the audience could join up in this room and we could talk live. That was very, very interesting, and some very cool things happened. So check that out.
But if you have something like 10 or 15 or 20 apps on the store, and you just gotta, you might have to get rid of the ones that aren't working or aren't making any money.
Link in the description and in the pinned comment down below. I'm tired. I'm really tired. I just want to go out into the living room and watch the latest episode of The Expanse on, what is it? Is it Netflix? No, Netflix doesn't have that. I can't remember what stupid subscription thingy I'm subscribing to in order to watch this one show. Either way, I'm gonna go watch The Expanse, but first, why don't you go down into the comment section and give everyone reading the comments down there your perspective of what a good list should be. Tell me how wrong I was with my list, and yeah, just write your heart out. Now, if you liked this video, then thumbs up would be really helpful, sharing this video. And also, if you want to support me in a financial way, you have the links over here, and you can find Agonizer Synth over there. We are working on an iPhone version, so that's gonna come out sometime in the future. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.